When Judge Jenkins started reading the inventory of my assets, it was the first time in the 3 hours of the hearing that I lifted my eyes to look at the man who had been my husband. My ex-husband, rather. Derek Rivers stood by the defendant's table looking less like the successful sales director he pretended to be and more like a pillar of salt. He looked as if he'd been hit in the back of the head with something heavy and unexpected. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes were wide and glazed, and beads of sweat dotted his receding hairline. A luxurious condo of 880 square feet in a thriving downtown Atlanta neighborhood. Judge Jenkins, a woman in her mid-50s with the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much domestic strife, read monotonously from the docket. A suburban home in Northwood, 1,290 square feet, plus a 1-acre lot earmarked for agricultural tax relief. A commercial property on Peachtree Street, currently leased as a high-end boutique. "This is some kind of mistake, an absolute lie," shrieked my mother-in-law, Patricia Rivers, launching herself up from the public benches with the fury of a thwarted queen. Her face, usually powdered into an expression of genteel superiority, was now crimson. That pauper can't own anything. She never even had the money for a decent new sweater. She's wearing the same dress from 3 years ago." The judge looked strictly over the top rim of her reading glasses, a familiar, silencing gesture. "I demand order in the courtroom, Ms. Rivers. One more outburst and I will have the bailiff remove you immediately." Patricia noisily sank back into her seat, but her angry hisses were audible even from across the room, and her eyes drilled into me, trying to set me on fire with contempt. I felt a strange, cold calmness settle over me. It was hard not to remember that day, 7 years ago, when this very woman, Patricia, had met me at the grand oak door of her spacious, inherited suburban home with open arms and the words, "Finally, my Derek found a decent girl. You're good stock, dear." She'd been assessing me then. My quiet demeanor, my sensible skirt, the small apartment my grandmother left me. I was seen as safe, malleable, and decent. How drastically everything had changed since that calculated welcome. Derek and I had met at an exclusive physical therapy and wellness center near Sedona, Arizona. I was there, seeking painful, grinding rehabilitation for an old back injury sustained in the car accident that had also tragically taken my fiancé's life 5 years prior. That accident had fractured more than my spine. It had shattered my world, leaving me closed off, burying myself in my stable but tedious job as an accountant at a county hospital. I lived alone in the modest one-bedroom apartment, resigned to a life of quiet solitude. Derek, 38 and impeccably tailored, was there taking a mandated executive break after a stressful year as a sales director for a major construction firm. He looked the part of success, tall, athletically built, with appealing if slightly guarded features and a practiced, charming smile that could melt the professional distance I tried to maintain. I was 32 and deeply vulnerable. He burst into my life like a heat wave, not a spring breeze. He courted me lavishly and publicly, showering me with expensive compliments and bouquets of flowers that filled my small apartment with suffocating scent. 2 months after we returned to Atlanta, he proposed over a candlelit dinner, promising me a life of comfort and a normal, bustling family. I mistook his determination for love. We had a small, modest wedding. I didn't want a lavish celebration. It felt disrespectful to the past I was still healing from. His parents, however, quickly informed us that in these volatile times, it was better to invest the money in property, a decision I passively agreed to. Patricia was initially cool but strictly polite, the kind of politeness that felt like an ongoing evaluation. I tried to convince myself this was merely a mother's natural desire to test a new daughter-in-law. Peter, my father-in-law, was quieter, a gentler soul, though he clearly bowed to his wife's sharp will in every domestic matter. The first year of marriage was, by all appearances, genuinely happy. We rented a modern apartment near Derek's lucrative job, established our rhythm, and sketched out future plans. I kept my accounting job, and Derek's career kept advancing. We were the ideal, aspirational American couple, visiting Patricia and Peter on weekends for the hearty early dinners Patricia insisted on cooking. The veneer of happiness cracked the moment I became pregnant. At first, the joy was infectious, almost overwhelming. Patricia Rivers, the queen of emotional restraint, actually teared up. "Finally! A grandchild! I feel it in my bones. It must be a boy, Derek's namesake." Derek himself was fussier than a mother hen, buying me every vitamin supplement on the market and signing me up for the most premium prenatal care at the most respected clinic in Atlanta. He wanted everything to be perfect. But during the second screening, Dr. Evans, a kind but clinical obstetrician, frowned slightly while hovering over the ultrasound monitor. "See this neutral fold, Sarah?" She pointed to the shimmering, grainy image of our tiny, developing child. "It's thickened. There is a statistical possibility of a chromosomal anomaly. I'm going to refer you for additional specialized testing." The next 2 weeks were a dark, suffocating hell. Blood tests, uncomfortable CVS procedures, consultations with genetic counselors, and the endless, silent, sickening wait for definitive results. Derek, once overly solicitous, became quiet and physically distant, spending his evenings staring at the muted television screen. Patricia, at every meeting, didn't offer comfort, only lamented, "Lord, why are we being punished? There have never been any illnesses in our family. Is this some kind of judgment on us, Derek?" The final diagnosis landed on me like a literal death sentence: Down syndrome. "You understand, Sarah," the geneticist, a woman with kind, weary eyes, said softly, folding her hands on her desk. "The timeline allows for a medical termination. Should you choose that path, we need you to think carefully and speak with your husband about the profound impact raising a special needs child will have on your marriage and future." I didn't need to think. I didn't need to consult a spreadsheet or weigh pros and cons. A person was growing inside me, a child who already felt like the only light left in my life. The last ultrasound had already confirmed it was a girl, my daughter, and even if she was born special, she would be mine. She was the one good thing to come out of the wreckage of the last 5 years. "I'm having the baby," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the sterile silence of the office. Derek, who had spent the consultation staring out the clinic window at the busy traffic below, remained silent, saying nothing at all. The real scandal erupted the moment we walked into his parents' immaculate living room that evening. Patricia Rivers screamed so loud the crystal chandelier above us seemed to rattle. "Are you absolutely out of your mind? Why would you bring that defective child into the world? You'll ruin your life, Derek's career, all of us. Get rid of it now before it's too late, Sarah." "Mom, please calm down," Derek tried to interject, but I could see the weakness in his eyes. He was already standing squarely on her side of the fence. "I can't do that," I replied, gripping the armrests of my chair, focusing on staying calm, on protecting the life inside me. "This is my child." "Your child?" my mother-in-law shrieked hysterically, clutching a hand to her chest. "It's going to be a burden, a vegetable that hangs around your neck for life. Do you realize what your life will become, and Derek's life? He wanted a normal family, normal kids, a clean slate." "Patricia, please, lower your voice," Peter murmured, shrinking into his corner of the velvet sofa. "And don't you dare call me by my first name, you arrogant little fool." She pointed a shaking finger directly at me, violating every rule of her own carefully curated decorum. "You are no longer a welcome part of this family. Either you get rid of that freak, or you get out. Derek, tell her she has to choose." Derek never said anything coherent. He just drove me back to our rented apartment in the same stunned, self-pitying silence. That evening, as I lay in bed, the emotional turmoil preventing sleep, he sat on the edge of the mattress, not touching me. "Listen, Sarah," he whispered, the sound devoid of warmth. "Maybe Mom is right? Why do we need this kind of struggle? You're still young. We can try again later, have a healthy baby, a normal one." I turned my head and saw it clearly in his eyes. Not sadness, not even true disappointment, but revulsion. He didn't see a person in me, nor a person in our daughter. We were just an inconvenient, expensive problem he wanted to dispose of cleanly, like a faulty business investment. "Leave," I said, and the single word was heavier than any shout. "Just go, Derek." I spent the remaining months of the pregnancy in a state of quiet, grim detachment. Derek formally stayed with me, sleeping in the guest room, but he lived his own life. He came home late, left early, and communicated in monosyllables. He stopped coming to doctor's appointments with me, claiming work was too demanding. Patricia called weekly, the same cruel query delivered in a fake, sickeningly sweet tone. "Well, have you come to your senses, Sarah? It's not too late to fix this mistake." I had not come to my senses. Maya was born on a cold, bright November morning. She was tiny, wrinkled, and unmistakably possessed of the characteristic features of her syndrome. But when the nurse placed her warm, fragile body on my chest and she opened her eyes, so clear, so pure, so trusting, a profound, protective love, fierce as a forest fire, swept through me. I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the only right choice. Derek came to the hospital only on the third day. He stood by the bassinet, looked down at his sleeping daughter for perhaps 30 seconds, and simply muttered, "Well, now you're satisfied, aren't you?" He didn't touch her. He didn't approach me. He left without another word. Maya's first year was an endless, exhausting blur. It was a cycle of doctor visits, developmental assessments, and sessions with pediatric physical, occupational, and speech pathologists. Children with Down syndrome require relentless, constant stimulation. I quit my accounting job. I couldn't bear to leave her with anyone, especially not Derek's family. He gave me money, yes, but reluctantly, always accompanied by a caustic jab. "How much more can you possibly spend on doctors? She'll never be normal anyway. Are you trying to bankrupt me?" Patricia completely refused to acknowledge her granddaughter's existence. My timid attempts to bring Maya to their spacious home were met with cold, vicious refusals. "Don't bring that creature here. It raises my blood pressure. This is punishment for your wicked stubbornness, Sarah." The isolation was crushing. My own parents had passed away years ago. My old, close friends had been pushed away in the deep grief following the accident. Derek's family actively ignored me and the child. Derek himself began coming home drunk more and more often, or simply not coming home at all. When Maya turned 18 months old, the final sharp piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I walked into the hallway and saw Derek talking quietly on the phone, his back to the living room window. He hadn't heard my footsteps. "Of course, I love you," he was saying softly, his voice full of the charming warmth he no longer used with me. "It's just a difficult situation right now, a technicality. Yes, I understand you want a baby, and I want a normal, healthy baby, not—" He paused, chuckling softly, chillingly. "We'll start trying as soon as I sort out this situation and get the papers filed." I quietly closed the door. Something inside me snapped completely, but the breaking was silent. There wasn't even anger left. Just a cold, focused emptiness and a strange, overwhelming relief. Now, at least, everything was honest, brutal, and entirely out in the open. The debt of love was paid in full. Now, it was time for justice. The next day, after Derek left for his important job, I sat down at the computer. It was the first time since Maya's birth that I searched for something for myself, not for rehabilitation information. It started accidentally, a small flicker of opportunity in the vast darkness. In one of the online support groups for mothers of special needs children, someone posted a vague ad. "Consultant needed for developing new educational materials for children with Down syndrome. Pay $300. I responded instantly, without much hope. 3 days later, a small publishing house in New York called. They were launching a desperately needed line of specialized literature and were seeking expert parents who could speak to the actual needs of these children. I consulted with them in meticulous detail, speaking methodically and with deep expertise drawn from 18 months of non-stop, desperate self-education. They paid me the promised money, but more crucially, they offered me a steady, ongoing collaboration on a retainer. That small retainer was the seed of my new life. Derek didn't notice a thing. In his self-obsessed world, I was still the discarded, stay-at-home mother, hopelessly confined to the apartment with the defective child. I hid the small consulting checks, opening a bank account in my maiden name, Sarah Thompson. In the first few months, I was making $400 to $600, consulting, helping craft educational programs, and quietly writing articles for specialized parent portals under a pseudonym. The major breakthrough, the true turning point, happened when I met Tiffany Hayes, the mother of a boy with severe autism, in an online advocacy forum. Tiffany, a former product designer, complained bitterly that she couldn't find quality developmental tools that were affordable, durable, and specifically designed for non-neurotypical learning patterns. "You know what?" I typed back to her one late night, driven by a surge of entrepreneurial adrenaline. "Let's stop complaining, and let's make them ourselves. I'll handle the curriculum and the money. You handle the design and production logistics." A week later, we registered a small LLC in the state of Georgia, Empower Play Educational Aids. Tiffany had a connection with a small, struggling workshop owner near Marietta, and she handled the production and logistics. I handled the core development and, crucially, the marketing, using the organic, desperate demand of the parent groups I was already a part of. We sold the first batch of 100 specialized developmental card sets in 2 weeks. The second batch, 200 sets, sold out in a single week. By the end of the first year, we had launched a full-scale online store, and Tiffany and I were each netting $4,000 to $6,000 a month. Derek remained completely oblivious. He had long since ceased caring what I did inside the walls of the apartment. His mistress, Olivia, as I learned from an intentionally overheard conversation, was a young, sleek administrator at a fitness club 10 years my junior, and actively dreaming of a white wedding. Patricia occasionally called, no longer to plead, but to deliver fresh venom. "I hear Derek found a normal woman, young and pretty, and they want children, normal children, you understand? You ruined his life with your stubbornness, you miserable fool." I listened silently to her cruelties, then hung up and went back to my spreadsheets. I didn't have time for her noise. I was quietly, methodically, building a fortress for my daughter and me. Maya grew. Her development was slower than typical children, a constant uphill climb. But she was making incredible progress. She started walking at 2 years old and speaking individual words at 3. She was the most affectionate, expressive, and smiling girl. When I brought her to the specialists at the developmental center, everyone admired her tenacious progress and radiant personality. Derek's neglect became absolute. He could go weeks without even seeing his daughter, even though we shared the same rented roof. I knew the marriage was a destructive pretense, but I wasn't ready to strike yet. I needed 2 things, time to grow the business and financial leverage. By the time Maya turned 3, I could easily afford true independence. Empower Play was booming. Tiffany and I had expanded our product line to include custom sensory bins and adaptive reading tools, hired 3 part-time employees, and opened representation in 3 states. My personal hidden income had stabilized at over $10,000 a month. I made my first major move, a deliberate act of financial revenge. I bought the condo, 880 square feet of sunlit freedom, in my own name, using a down payment from my business account, then paid off the remainder over 8 months. It was in a family-friendly, thriving downtown neighborhood with a dedicated playground, and critically, it was within walking distance of the Developmental Services Center. Derek, who only glanced at the joint account balance, never noticed the movement of funds from my separate, secret bank. Then came the suburban house, 50 miles outside the city, a place for respite. It was a bargain, needing extensive cosmetic work, but the 1-acre lot was perfect for the vegetable garden I dreamed of tending with Maya. I filed the deed under my legal name, Sarah Thompson. My final investment was the small commercial space downtown, the property on Peachtree Street. I took out a small, short-term commercial loan and paid it off in 5 months using my retained business profits. Renting it out as a boutique shop generated a stable $800 a month, which I immediately put into Maya's trust fund. In 4 years, while Derek entertained his mistress, publicly mourning the normal family he could never have, I had transformed myself from a discarded, financially helpless housewife into a formidable businesswoman with a net worth exceeding $1,350,000. I was ready. And now, in this stuffy Atlanta courtroom, where my special needs child had been so viciously called a little leech, where my mother-in-law was hissing curses across the room, and where the man I had married was demanding to be left with something from the marital estate, they were finally learning the truth. The total value of the respondent's assets, the judge looked up from the documents, her face utterly expressionless, is confirmed at $1,350,000. Derek grasped the edge of the defense table, the wood creaking slightly. He was white as the linen collar of his expensive shirt. I met his gaze, the first real, focused eye contact we'd had in a year, and smiled for the first time during the entire hearing. It was a cold, satisfying smile of absolute victory. This is impossible," Derek stammered, looking at me as if I were a stranger who had stolen his identity. "Where did you get that? You weren't working. You had no income." "The plaintiff suggests the respondent was not working," Judge Jenkins stated, looking over her glasses, the hint of disdain in her voice barely suppressed. "I have documents here confirming that Ms. Rivers is a 50% co-owner of a successful multi-state developmental aids company, engages in specialized consulting work, and has a stable, verifiable income averaging $10,000 monthly over the past year. All income is official, taxes are paid, and the documents are impeccably in order, Your Honor." My attorney, Michael Carver, an elegant, silver-haired man I'd hired 3 months prior, interjected smoothly, leaning back in his chair like a confident predator. Patricia let out a strangled, inarticulate sound and clutched dramatically at her chest. Peter, looking utterly defeated, scrambled to find her heart medication, which she carried everywhere, and used every opportunity to demonstrate how grievously her health was suffering because of me and Maya. You're a thief!" she suddenly shrieked, pointing a trembling, age-spotted finger at me. "You stole from my son! That's his money! He supported you all these years, and you—" "Order! I said order!" The judge hammered her gavel with authority. "Ms. Rivers," Michael Carver said calmly, turning slightly toward the public benches, "all the assets and income acquired by my client were acquired by her personally, outside the period of the marriage in terms of the initial right of ownership, or demonstrably through the business she created and operated solely. Your son, Derek Rivers, has no claim to this." "But I gave her money!" Derek finally found his voice, a high-pitched, desperate plea. "I supported her and the child. That means I have a right to half of that business." "You have a right to what exactly, Mr. Rivers?" Michael Carver opened his file to the precise ledger of child support payments. "Let's review the support payments you made. According to bank statements, over the last 4 years, you transferred an average of $1,250 per month for the support of the child. Considering your official income of $7,500, that represents approximately 17%. That is perhaps adequate, but hardly generous for a special needs child." I remembered every single one of those monthly transfers. I remembered the screaming fits Derek would throw every time I asked for a few $100s more for a new specialist or complex therapeutic equipment for Maya. He'd shout that I was milking him dry, that the child was taking everything, that normal kids didn't cost this much, $1,250 a month for a child requiring constant specialist sessions, expensive adaptive materials, special nutrition, and weekly therapeutic visits. I spent 10 times that amount on Maya, and it all came from my own money that I earned, managed, and grew. Furthermore, Your Honor, Michael Carver continued, his voice heavy with finality, I have witnessed statements from neighbors and friends confirming that for the last 2 years, the plaintiff has not actually resided at the registered marital address, but has been living exclusively with his, girlfriend. We also have indisputable evidence that the plaintiff systematically evaded participating in the child's upbringing, refused to take his daughter to doctors, and showed absolutely no interest in her health, development, or education. That's a lie. I was just working a lot. Derek jumped up, red in the face. Working for the family, for our future. Which family, Derek? I finally spoke, leaning forward, my voice surprisingly calm and clear, a clean, sharp sound in the stuffy courtroom air. The one where you called your daughter defective and a vegetable? Or the one you were planning to build with your mistress, Olivia? He froze, his mouth agape. I have recordings, Derek. I nodded to my attorney, who produced a voice recorder that looked ridiculously small and innocuous. I started recording our conversation 6 months ago when I realized divorce wasn't enough. I needed protection. Michael Carver pressed the button, and the courtroom was instantly filled with Derek's voice, raw and pathetic. I'm tired of all of this, Olivia. I'm tired of living with that freak. I want a normal family, you understand? Normal kids. And Sarah is a stubborn fool who ruined my life. We should have gotten rid of him right away when the doctors told us. Patricia was deathly pale. Derek clutched his head, his world visibly collapsing around him. That's not what I meant, he mumbled, his voice hoarse. And here's another recording, Your Honor. The attorney switched tracks instantly. The next voice was Patricia's, vicious and triumphant, talking to her son 3 months ago. Finally, you're divorcing her. Take the house, Derek. She's a nobody. She has nowhere to go with her brat. Let her move out wherever she wants, and you can live normally with your Olivia. She'll give you healthy, handsome children, unlike that one. Silence hung in the air, thick and poisoned. Judge Jenkins looked at Patricia with open, undisguised disgust, as if she were inspecting something rotten. I didn't mean that, my mother-in-law stammered, looking around frantically for an escape. I was just worried about my son's future. Enough, the judge raised a weary but firm hand. We move on to the division of assets. Derek's lawyer, a young man with a cocky, arrogant look who clearly hadn't done his due diligence, sputtered about jointly acquired property, arguing that the wife couldn't have engaged in a successful business if the plaintiff hadn't provided the essential structure of a family. Michael Carver calmly, surgically dismantled every argument. The condo was purchased with my client's personal money, in her name. I have the entire documented financial history. The house is the same. The commercial property is the same. The business is registered to my client and a partner. Derek Rivers has no legal, equitable, or moral claim to any of it. But we were married for 4 years. Derek started to scream, desperation overcoming his caution. Everything acquired during the marriage is shared. Not everything, Mr. Rivers, the judge patiently explained, leaning into the microphone. Section 34 of the Family Code stipulates that property acquired by one spouse through a gratuitous transaction or as a direct result of individual business activity is his or her personal property. Your wife created the business independently without using your capital. All documents confirm this fact. I demand compensation, Derek shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I supported her while she stayed at home. That's also a contribution to the marriage. You supported the family by fulfilling your minimal duty as a husband and father, my attorney cut in, his voice steely. And you did so poorly. My client, in contrast, not only provided for herself and the child independently, but also contributed significantly more to the household expenses than you. Here is the proof. He pulled out another pristine file. Here are the receipts for the rent of the apartment for the last 3 years. Payment was made from my client's personal business account. Here are checks for groceries, children's clothes, medication, and developmental sessions, all from her separate personal funds. The picture, Your Honor, is quite clear. You were formally married, but for the last 3 years, each of you was effectively living on your own income, with the crucial difference that my client spent hers solely on the child and the household, while the plaintiff spent his exclusively on his personal life. I had collected every single receipt, every bank statement, every canceled check for 2 years, knowing this day would come. I scanned them, saved them in a dedicated, encrypted folder, and backed them up to the cloud, ready for the reckoning. We moved to the question of the child's residence, the judge said, shuffling documents that looked heavy with bureaucratic weight. The plaintiff requests that the minor, Maya Rivers, reside with the mother. The respondent does not object. I do not object, I confirmed quietly. Well, I object now, Derek unexpectedly cut in, his voice cracking. He was scrambling now, seeing his financial future evaporate. Everyone, including his own mother, stared at him. Derek, what are you... Patricia whispered. Shut up, Mom! He shook his head violently. I want the child to stay with me. I'm her father. May I inquire about the sudden reason for this decision? Michael Carver asked, his tone glacial, considering the plaintiff's absolute lack of involvement in the child's upbringing over the last 4 years. I'm her father. Derek nervously licked his lips. I have the right, and besides, the mother doesn't have proper living conditions. She lives in a rented apartment. My client has her own condo of 880 square feet, purchased in cash, the attorney reminded him dryly. As well as a suburban home, her living conditions are more than adequate and demonstrably better than the plaintiff's current situation. But she works. She works too much now. Who will watch the child? Derek was grasping wildly at straws. My mom can help. The same mother who, according to sworn testimony and recording evidence, called your daughter a brat and a freak, and refused to see her for all 4 years of her life. The judge looked through the papers, her expression hardening. Do you truly believe that is a suitable candidate for primary child care? Patricia winced, finally silenced. Furthermore, the judge continued, according to the Department of Family and Children Services report, the mother's living conditions fully meet all requirements. The condo has a dedicated children's room and every necessary adaptive tool for a child with special needs. The mother systematically takes the child to every doctor and specialist and is actively and demonstrably engaged in her development. You, Derek Rivers, according to that very same report, have not visited your daughter at home once in the last year. I was working, Derek weakly tried to justify himself. Working or living with your mistress, the judge countered. I have testimony from 3 separate witnesses confirming you were residing at a different address for 14 months. She took off her glasses and wearily rubbed the bridge of her nose. You know, Mr. Rivers, in 20 years on the bench, I've seen many cases of contested custody, but do you genuinely want to keep the child, or is this simply a cynical, last-ditch attempt to evade mandatory child support payments? Derek was silent, his face now a furious, mottled red. I ask the court to consider, Michael Carver stood up, delivering the coup de grace, that the plaintiff systematically spoke about the child in a profoundly humiliating way. We have recordings and witnesses ready to confirm that he used offensive words to describe his own daughter, was ashamed of her existence, and refused to go out with her or take her to the clinic. Transferring the child to such a parent would cause serious, irreparable harm to her psychological health. But she doesn't understand anything, Derek burst out, reverting to his old cruel defense. She has Down syndrome. Intellectual disability does not equate to a lack of emotions, Mr. Rivers. The judge cut him off sharply. Children with Down syndrome are perfectly capable of sensing how others feel about them, especially a parent's rejection. And judging by the report from the clinical psychologist who observes your daughter, the girl actively recoils from you and experiences significant distress in your presence. I remembered the day the rehabilitation center's psychologist delicately asked me if everything was okay at home. Maya, who was usually affectionate and trusting with every stranger, would visibly shrink back and hide behind my legs whenever Derek was around. Children know. They always know the difference between acceptance and rejection. "The court rules," the judge began to read the final decision, her voice now firm and resounding, "that the residence of the minor, Maya Rivers, shall be determined with the mother, Sarah Rivers Thompson. The father is granted the right to visitation every second and fourth Saturday of the month, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. in the presence of the mother or a person authorized by her at a neutral, supervised location." In the presence of the mother? Supervised? Derek was outraged, sputtering with disbelief. "I can't even be alone with my own child?" "Given your stated position and demonstrated attitude toward the child over the last 4 years, the court deems supervision necessary for the child's emotional safety." The judge sliced through his protest. "If you prove you've fundamentally changed, it can be reconsidered. But for now, this is the arrangement." "Regarding child support," she continued, "considering the plaintiff's official income of $7,500 monthly, the court rules to collect child support at the rate of 25% of all types of income, which amounts to $1,875 per month." "What? That's highway robbery." Derek jumped up again. "I have loans, I have obligations, I won't pay that." "That is the standard, state-mandated rate for one child," the judge replied calmly. "You may appeal, but considering that your daughter requires additional, expensive medical care, specialist sessions, and lifelong rehabilitation, the amount is more than fair and necessary." "But she has tons of money herself!" Derek shouted, pointing a furious finger across the room at me. "Why does she need my child support? It's a punitive measure." "Child support is the parent's obligation to support the child," the judge patiently explained, "regardless of the other parent's financial situation. You do not get to unilaterally renounce your responsibility, Mr. Rivers." A long, heavy silence descended. "Exactly," the judge nodded slowly. "Furthermore, the court rules to collect court costs from the plaintiff, payable to the respondent, in the amount of $3,000, as well as an award of compensation for emotional distress." "What emotional distress?" Patricia wailed, finally recovering her voice. "For the systematic insults, financial negligence, and humiliation the respondent was subjected to by the plaintiff and his mother." The judge looked at Patricia coldly. "We have recordings, witness testimony, and messaging transcripts presented as evidence. The compensation amount is $4,500. Derek sank onto his chair, utterly defeated, his face ashen. Patricia dissolved into full-blown hysterics, and Peter frantically tried to calm his wife, looking utterly lost in the ruins of their carefully constructed pride. I sat there, watching the scene unfold, completely detached. It was a perfect, cold revenge. These people had tormented me and my vulnerable daughter for 4 long years, using every tool of contempt and cruelty to make me feel worthless. And all that time, I was quietly building my strength, constructing a self-sufficient future where their judgment held no power. "The session is concluded." The judge banged her gavel. "The decision takes effect in 30 days. During this time, the parties may file an appeal." She stood and walked out, her weary posture somehow radiating justice. I got up to leave, gathering my purse and files. Derek blocked my path to the swinging doors. "Wait, Sarah, we need to talk, alone." "About what, Derek?" I looked at him calmly, the sight of his desperate, haggard face giving me no pleasure, only profound indifference. "Well, maybe we rushed all of this." He tried to put on a look of remorse and regret, an old salesman's trick. "Maybe we could try again." I realize I was wrong, that I behaved terribly. "But we're a family, Sarah. We have a child together. We can move into your new condo." "We had a child all 4 of those years," I replied, my voice flat, holding up a hand to stop him from touching me. That didn't stop you from calling her a freak and living with your mistress in her apartment. I've changed. I understand now. He grabbed my arm, panic making him desperate. Listen, let's just try. I'll be different, honest. I'll help with Maya. It's Maya, I corrected him. Her name is Maya. And no, Derek, we won't try. There is nothing left to try. I pulled my arm free and headed for the exit. Patricia, her face streaked with tears and makeup, lunged for my sleeve. You destroyed my son's life, she hissed, venom coating every syllable. Because of you, those payments, all that money. You planned this whole thing. You deceived us. I didn't plan anything, Patricia, I answered, looking straight into her hate-filled eyes. I just worked. I worked tirelessly while you were busy having fun and passing judgment. And you know what the funniest part is? You could have benefited from all of this. You could have been a loving grandmother, helped build a business, celebrated your granddaughter's successes. You could have been proud of a daughter-in-law who built a thriving company from scratch. But you chose hate and cruelty instead. That was your choice, and you paid the price for it, just like Derek. I walked out of the courthouse, Michael Carver trailing professionally behind me into the crisp, chilly air of late October. For the first time in many, many years, I felt truly, unequivocally free. Maya met me at the door of the rental apartment. Chloe, my assistant, a bright, patient student working toward her teaching degree, who got along brilliantly with my daughter, had been watching her. The girl threw herself around my neck, babbling happily, her words still a little difficult to decipher at 4.5, but her meaning perfectly clear. Mommy came back! She hugged me tight, and I felt the last of the day's courtroom tension drain away into the comforting reality of her small, solid body. How was she, Chloe? I asked, kissing my daughter's head, smelling the faint scent of Play-Doh and sunshine in her hair. Great, Sarah. We had a great learning session, played outside on the balcony, and she ate all her lunch. Right, Maya? Chloe smiled at the girl. She was only a little fussy right before nap time, but that's just because she was waiting for her mama. I paid Chloe, walked her out, and finally had the quiet I craved. I sat on the sofa and pulled Maya onto my lap. She snuggled in, putting her thumb in her mouth, a habit we hadn't managed to break yet, and looked up at me with those clear, honest eyes. Mommy, she whispered suddenly. Daddy. I froze. She rarely mentioned her father. Perhaps she sensed my own internal state, the anxiety that had surrounded the finality of the court date. Daddy will come to visit us now, I said slowly, choosing every word with care. Sometimes. But we'll live here alone together, sweetheart. Just you and me. Is that okay? She nodded, not fully understanding the legal terms or the emotional trauma, but trusting me implicitly. She settled her head against my shoulder, and I knew, more certainly than any business decision, that I had done everything right. Whatever came next, my daughter would be safe. She would have a home, care, and unconditional love, everything that had been denied to her by the man who was supposed to be her father. That evening, Tiffany, my business partner, called. So, you survived the battle? Her voice was full of protective sympathy. How did the monster handle the reckoning? I told her the highlights. Tiffany listened, throwing in emotional comments now and then. I hope that miserable piece of trash doesn't try to contact you again, she finally said, her voice laced with outrage. Though, you know, guys like that don't quit. He'll call, try to play the sympathy card, threaten you. I'm changing my number tomorrow, I replied, looking around the small rented apartment that smelled like Derek's indifference. And I think I'll move into the new condo next week. Why wait another month? The condo I had purchased a year prior was fully ready. I had been slowly moving things and furnishing it with love, preparing the sanctuary. That's the spirit, Sarah, Tiffany approved enthusiastically. Start your new life, no looking back. By the way, I have some real news. Remember we discussed franchising? Franchising. We had talked about it for the last 6 months, a massive leap. Our business model was so successful and our demand so high that people were interested in replicating Empower Play in other states. Seriously? I brightened instantly, the weight of the courtroom lifting. Are there concrete offers? 3 cities, Sarah. Dallas, Chicago, and Phoenix. People are ready to invest capital. They just need our full development package and ongoing support. We're going national. We talked for over an hour, discussing the legal details, the revenue splits, and the growth potential. When I finally hung up the phone, I realized I was genuinely, uncontrollably smiling. Life wasn't just going on. It was getting exponentially, brilliantly better. The next day, I began the move, packing up the ghosts of my failed marriage along with our possessions. Maya was thrilled with the new condo, especially her room, which I had furnished with soft peach walls, a cozy, safe bed, and custom-made special educational modules that we manufactured ourselves. A thick, soft carpet covered the floor, perfect for playing with her developmental toys. "Mine," my daughter happily announced, running into the room, her voice echoing joyfully. "My room, mine." "Yours, sweetie," I knelt beside her, hugging her tightly. "This is where we'll live now. Do you like your new house?" She nodded vigorously, already distracted by the carefully arranged shelves of new, colorful toys. Derek tried to call on the 3rd day after the hearing. I screened the call, watching his name flash on the screen with cold amusement. He called again and again, then wrote in a messenger app, "We need to talk. Please answer. It's an emergency." I blocked his number everywhere. An hour later, a text came from Patricia's number. "We want to see Maya. We're her grandparents. We have rights. Let's meet and discuss everything calmly. Little Maya, it's so cruel to keep her from us." This woman hadn't wanted to even look at her granddaughter for 4 years, yet now she was citing her familial feelings. I replied curtly, "All rights are determined by the court order, Mrs. Rivers. If you wish to see the child, contact my attorney, Michael Carver, to schedule a supervised, neutral visit." After that, the calls and texts stopped for a week. I breathed a tentative sigh of relief, deciding they had finally, truly given up. But 10 days later, the real, ugly neediness of Derek's spirit manifested. I was returning home with Maya from her weekly speech therapy session. The day was sunny, unusually warm for late October in Atlanta. Maya was walking beside me, holding my hand, humming a simple, self-soothing tune in her own melodic language. We reached the security door of the condo building when Derek stepped out from around the brick corner. He looked awful, haggard, aged 10 years, with dark, bruised circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled, ill-fitting jacket. Maya immediately clung to me, fear making her small body rigid. "Sarah, please don't run away," he quickly started, his voice cracking. "I just want to talk to you. 5 minutes, no more." "I have nothing to talk to you about, Derek." I tried to walk around him, but he shuffled sideways, physically blocking the way. "Wait, please!" There was genuine, clawing panic in his voice, not for me or Maya, but for his own sinking ship. I'm ruined. You understand? The child support, the court payments. I can't even afford the mortgage on my place. Olivia left me, Sarah. My mom isn't speaking to me anymore." "And what does any of that have to do with me?" I tightened my grip on my daughter's hand, pulling her protectively behind my skirt. "You can refuse the child support. You have plenty of money, Sarah. You're a millionaire. Why do you need my miserable $1,800? He reached out and grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging in. I pulled free, stepping back quickly, my heart pounding with protective rage. "That's not my money, Derek," I said, my voice dangerously cold. "That is your daughter's money, for her therapy, her development, her future. And if you think for 1 second I'll give it up just because things got difficult for the man who abandoned her, but what good is it doing her?" He raised his voice, loud enough to draw the attention of a nearby resident. "She'll never be normal anyway. Why spend so much money on a lost cause?" Maya began to cry, quietly, plaintively, hiding her face deep in the fabric of my jacket. "Get out!" I felt the true protective rage boil up inside me, blinding me to everything but her safety. Right now, Derek, or I'm calling the police and having you arrested for violating the court order." "But it's your own fault," he persisted, his face twisted in a horrible, blaming snarl. "You should have listened to the doctors. Should never have had that... Say it." I stared him down. My eyes narrowed into cold steel. "Say the word. The word you called your own daughter all these years." He fell silent, breathing heavily, his shallow conscience finally hitting him. "You know what the worst part is, Derek." I hugged the crying Maya tightly to me. "It's not that you're out of money or that your girlfriend left you. It's that you still don't understand what you lost. You have a daughter, an amazing, kind, smart girl. Yes, she's special, but she would have loved you fiercely if you had given her even a fraction of a chance. And you didn't. And now, truly, it is far too late." I walked around him and quickly ushered Maya into the building. He didn't follow. Upstairs, I spent a long time rocking Maya, singing lullabies, and rubbing her back until her small, shaking body finally calmed. I called Michael Carver and told him what happened. "That's a direct violation of the court order and harassment," he said immediately. "Ambushing you at home, scaring the child. We can file for a restriction of his rights if he continues this pattern." "Let's wait 2 days," I replied, unwilling to dive back into court. Maybe the police threat finally sunk in. But 2 days later, the story repeated itself. This time, Derek was waiting for us outside the Developmental Services Center, lurking by a park bench. Again, an aggressive, manipulative attempt to talk. Again, the raw humiliation. Again, a terrified Maya. I immediately filed for the restriction of his parental rights. Michael Carver drafted the petition, attaching witness statements and video evidence from the condo surveillance cameras that clearly showed Derek stalking us. The restriction hearing was scheduled for early December. Strangely, Derek didn't show up. His lawyer tried to get a continuance, but Judge Jenkins denied it without discussion. The court ruled to restrict the father's visitation to once a month, and only in the presence of an authorized caseworker from the Department of Children and Family Services. After that final ruling, Derek Rivers disappeared from our lives entirely. The child support payments, however, arrived promptly on the first of the month, automatically deducted from his salary. I never saw him again. A year passed, blurring into 2. Maya turned 5, then 6. She started at a specialized preschool, where dedicated, experienced teachers worked with her individualized curriculum. She was making phenomenal strides, speaking in complex, multi-word sentences, recognizing letters, and counting to 10. The doctors said that with this continuous, high-quality approach, she would be able to attend a regular school with a full inclusion education program by age 7. Our business, Empower Play, had expanded to 8 states, then 10. The franchise model worked brilliantly. Tiffany and I were discussing a move into the international educational market, perhaps Canada and the UK. My income grew to over $15,000 a month. I opened a massive savings and investment account in Maya's name, depositing money for her future, for her college, therapy, and anything she might ever need, ensuring her safety for life. I met Aaron at a business conference in Miami. He manufactured highly specialized adaptive equipment for the rehabilitation of children with mobility issues. We started talking shop, exchanged contacts, and soon began collaborating on a new line of sensory tools. And then, we just started dating. Aaron was divorced, his former wife having moved to the West Coast, and he didn't have children of his own. When I told him about Maya and her condition, I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable flinch, the pulling away, the mention of normal. He didn't flinch. He simply asked, "When can I meet her, Sarah?" They liked each other immediately, instantly. Aaron knew how to talk to Maya, calmly, patiently, and, most importantly, respectfully. He never used baby talk or treated her like she was sick or fragile. He just accepted her for the radiant, unique person she was. "You know what I realized working with these kids?" he said one evening when we were sitting in the quiet of the condo kitchen after Maya was asleep. "That the word normal doesn't mean anything at all. We are all profoundly different. Someone has Down syndrome. Someone is severely nearsighted. Someone has a debilitating anxiety disorder. They're just differences, Sarah, you know? Some are more noticeable than others, but we are all just people, needing the same acceptance. I looked at him and thought, this is how it should have been all along. This is what a loving person looks like. We dated for almost a year before he suggested moving in together. I agreed, not right away. I was afraid Maya wouldn't handle the change. But my daughter loved Aaron. She called him Unc Aaron in her own special way and ran happily to the door whenever he arrived. One evening, a few months after Aaron had moved in, I received a strange text from an unfamiliar number. This is Peter Rivers. Patricia passed away yesterday. Massive heart attack. Derek is not coping and asked me to reach out. He would like to see his daughter at the funeral for closure. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. Patricia was dead. The woman who had poisoned my life demanded I abort my child and called her a freak. What should I feel? Nothing. I felt nothing but a cold, final emptiness, as if a long-burning fever had broken. I'm not going, I told Aaron, showing him the text. And I am absolutely not taking Maya. You shouldn't, he hugged me tightly. No need to traumatize the child or yourself for those people. I sent Peter a brief, professional reply. My sincere condolences for your loss. We will not be attending the funeral. All future contact must go through my attorney. A week later, he called me himself. His voice was tired, the voice of a very old, broken man. I know I have no right to ask this, Sarah, but Derek is doing very badly. After his mother's death, he started drinking heavily and lost his job last week. They're foreclosing on his place for debts. He says he wants to see his daughter just once, just to say goodbye. Say goodbye? I frowned. Is he going somewhere, Peter? Peter paused, a choked sound passing over the line. He talks about suicide, he finally whispered, his voice trembling. I don't know if he's serious, but I'm terrified. I'm old and sick. I can't keep an eye on him. If something happens, I won't survive it. Fine, I sighed, the need for final closure winning out over my deep resentment. One meeting, in the presence of a psychologist and me, provided he comes sober and lucid, and only if he promises not to scare the child. The meeting was arranged the following day at the Developmental Services Center. Irina, the wonderful psychologist who worked with Maya, knew our entire family history and agreed to supervise. Derek arrived on time. He was unrecognizable. He had lost significant weight, aged 10 years and 2, and looked completely gray and defeated. He was dressed neatly, but he was clearly struggling to hold himself together. Maya immediately hid behind my legs when she saw him, her small hands gripping my skirt tightly. Hi, Derek said softly, kneeling down awkwardly to be at her level. Maya, do you remember me? It's Daddy. She stayed silent, clinging tightly to my hand, peering at him from behind my hip. I'm your daddy. His voice cracked, tears finally beginning to well up in his eyes. And I want to tell you, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Maya looked at him warily, assessing the strange, trembling man. I was a bad daddy, he continued, speaking to her small shoes, a very bad one. I didn't love you. I didn't care for you. I said terrible, unforgivable things about you. And that was wrong because you are a beautiful, good girl, and I regret so much that I didn't realize it sooner. He wiped his eyes roughly with his sleeve, leaving a smudge. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said, looking up at me for the first time. I just want you to know that it's not your fault. You're not to blame for anything. I am the one to blame. Only me, and I will regret what I did to you and your mother for the rest of my life. Maya surprised us both. She slowly stepped forward, out from behind my protection, and extended her hand to him. Not for a hug, but just her small, perfect hand, like one offers a respectful acquaintance when saying goodbye. Daddy, she said clearly, seriously. Bye-bye. Derek took her small palm in his, squeezing it gently, his face crumpling. Bye-bye, little Maya, he whispered. Grow up big and happy. Live well. That was our last meeting. I never saw Derek Rivers again. 2 more years passed, bringing healing and prosperity. Maya started elementary school, a regular school, in an inclusive education class. She still had difficulty with academics, but she tried her hardest, always with a sunny disposition. She made friends instantly with a bright, chatty girl named Katie who lived in our building. She learned to read, write, and count slowly but surely. She danced, drew, and played with her friends. I married Aaron in a quiet, intimate ceremony. We just signed the papers, had a small celebration with Tiffany, Peter, and a few close friends at the suburban house, which was now a gorgeous retreat. Maya was thrilled. Aaron wasn't UNC Aaron anymore. He was her real, kind, and loving father. Aaron officially adopted her. Derek, through his attorney, did not object at all. Our business grew to a national level, a powerhouse in the specialized education industry. We opened production facilities in 3 states and launched a comprehensive online platform with customized courses for parents of special needs children. I spoke at national conferences, gave interviews, and became known in specialized circles as a leading expert on Down syndrome rehabilitation and parental advocacy. And you know what the most amazing thing of all was? I was happy. Truly, fundamentally happy. I had a beloved daughter, a loving husband, and a successful business that actually did good in the world. I had built everything I had dreamed of during those terrible, lonely days when I sat in a rented apartment with a baby in my arms, unsure of how I would face the next day. One crisp autumn evening, when Maya was 8 years old, Peter called me. I hadn't spoken to him in years. I just transferred money to him twice a year, quietly, anonymously, to help him survive. He was completely alone now, and very sick. I couldn't leave the old man without help, despite everything his wife and son had done. "Derek died," he said without preamble, his voice barely a breath. 3 days ago. Liver cirrhosis. I buried him yesterday, Sarah. Alone. I was silent, not knowing what to say, feeling only the lingering echo of his cruelty and the relief of his final departure. "He asked me to tell you," the old man continued, his voice cracking, "that he was grateful you let him see Maya that last time. It was the only light memory he had in his final years." "I'm so sorry, Peter," I said quietly. "Don't be," he sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. "He chose his own path, as we all do. I would like to see my granddaughter sometime, if you wouldn't mind. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm old and sick. I'll die soon, and I'd like to see her just once, Sarah. Normally." "All right," I finally decided, the weight of his loneliness too heavy to bear. "Come this Saturday for an hour. You can see your granddaughter. But this doesn't mean we'll be in regular contact. This is for her, not for us." "Thank you." There were quiet tears in his voice. "Thank you, Sarah." He arrived that Saturday with a huge bouquet of white and peach roses and a large box of fancy chocolates. Maya was wary of him, but showed no fear. Peter sat in the armchair and simply looked at her, watching her play, never taking his eyes off her. When she showed him her latest school drawings and told him about dance class, he listened, nodding, and smiled the fragile, honest smile of a broken man. "She's so smart," he said quietly before leaving. "She talks so well, knows so much. And we were blind fools. We chased a phantom. Forgive us." I walked him to the door, the chill of the afternoon settling in. "You know what I finally realized?" He turned on the threshold, facing the twilight. "Happiness was right here all along, in this little girl, in you, in the truth of your spirit, and we chased after illusions, a normal child, a normal family, a perfect life. But what does normal even mean? Our Derek was normal, healthy, and conventionally successful. And where is he now? And your Maya, who is special, is living and enjoying a full, thriving life. We just didn't understand what real happiness was until it was gone." He left. I never saw him again. He died 6 months later, quietly in his sleep in his empty apartment. I continued to live, raise my daughter, grow my business, love my husband, and build the future. Sometimes in the evenings, when Maya was asleep and I sat in her room, looking at her peaceful face in the low light, I thought about the path we had traveled, about that courtroom where my ex-husband screamed that he didn't need that little leech, about the profound shock on their faces when they learned that the pauper housewife was a successful, independent entrepreneur, and about how their lives, built on contempt and cruelty, had crumbled into dust. I didn't gloat. Honestly, I was just indifferent. They chose their path. I chose mine. They lost everything they valued. I gained everything that mattered. That's the simple moral math of life. The one thing I knew for certain was that my girl would never, ever hear that she wasn't wanted, would never feel that she was wrong or defective. She would grow up with absolute love, dedicated care, and profound respect, because she deserves it, just like every child on this earth. And everything else is just not important. You know, looking back now, I realize something important. Sometimes the world tries to break you, just to see if you'll rise stronger. I spent years proving my worth to people who never deserved to judge me. But in the end, the only validation that mattered came from my daughter's smile. Maya taught me what unconditional love truly is. She reminded me that strength isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and born from pain you refuse to surrender to. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Don't let anyone define your value. You can rebuild your life from ashes, one act of love, one brave choice at a time. And when the storm passes, you'll see, peace doesn't come from revenge, but from freedom and self-respect. If you feel the same way and liked my story, show it by sending a like to this video. Let's see how many of us there are. I'm curious, what city are you watching from, and what time is it there? Write it in the comments. If you'd like to support my journey, you can send a small donation. Thank you for listening and sharing your precious time with me. For more life stories like this, you can check out other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll love. Click one and start listening right away. Love.